Hey everybody, Jim here. Welcome back. Today I am doing a follow-up to my Super Famicom import buying guide. If you'll recall, several months ago I did a buying guide on the hardware itself, good prices for picking up a Super Famicom, and also included some info on how to mod a North American SNES so that you can play Super Famicom games without having to actually buy a Super Famicom. And then I also recommended 10 good starter games that are English friendly and fun to play and also really affordable. So a link to that first video will be down in the description if you want to go and check that out. I would recommend that you do. This time around, I did also, still try to keep in mind games that are really fun to play for starters, and then also English friendly. I wasn't so concerned about price range this time around. That was kind of the purpose of the first video, is to recommend a whole bunch of cheaper Super Famicom games to get you started. This time around, these are like 10 games that are still sort of like in a reasonable price range. Some of them are like a little more expensive. A couple of these are actually super cheap. But these are just like 10 more games that I think if you were going to start collecting for the Super Famicom, these would be like a logical next 10 games to pick up, because they're all really good, they're fun, and they are English friendly, except for this first game, and I will explain. So this is Ys 5, and kind of like Ys 3, this game is a little bit of a breakaway in the early Ys games in the series. The first couple of games and then Ys 4 are basically the same gameplay style, but Ys 3 is a side-scrolling action game, and Ys 5 is a top-down action RPG, so kind of Zelda-ish, kind of Newtopia-ish in that same vein. But in this game, you can jump as well from one level to another. There's a bit of platforming in it. A couple of different ways to attack. You can get magic items. You can basically do all the things you imagine you would be able to do in an action RPG like Ys. But some people don't really care for it so much. They think it's kind of like a poor man's action RPG in that vein. You'd be better off playing like Zelda or Secret of Mana or something like that. I won't say that this game is as good as Link to the Past, but I think it kind of gets a bad rap. I've heard people say that this is sort of maybe the black sheep in the series. I still say this is a really great game. Now, obviously, it's an action RPG, so it's going to be a little text-heavy, so that's not so English-friendly. But the reason I am featuring this game is because it does now have an English patch. So you can play Ys 5 a number of different ways. Obviously, there are ROMs available, and you can patch them with this English translation, and you'll be good to go. But there are also SNES reproduction carts of Ys 5 that have the English translation just, built into them automatically. So you can buy English versions of this game, or you can buy the Japanese cartridge, or you can patch a ROM, however you want to play it. Also, there's a follow-up to this. I think it's called Ys 5 Expert, and it's just a more difficult version of Ys 5. Again, this game gets, I don't know if it's necessarily a bad rep, but some people see it as being like sort of a lesser Ys game. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's really good, and now you can play it in English if you want to, so definitely go ahead and pick up Ys 5, add it to your Super Famicom or SNES collection. Next up is a game I've talked about before. I put it in my top 10 Super Famicom games list, and I've already said that it's like my favorite puzzle game on the Super Famicom or SNES. It just doesn't matter. It's one of my favorites of all time, really, and that is Tetris Battle Gaiden. And I can't really say more about this game than I've already said about it before, but I just will say extremely fun, competitive, addictive versus puzzle game. Essentially, you have a bunch of different characters to choose from, and they all have different special abilities that you can use to essentially ruin your opponent's game. I mean, you can just litter their side of the screen with holes they have to fill, or turn all of their blocks into stone that they can't clear from the screen, or just add more blocks to it, or take control of their puzzle pieces for a while. There's just so much stuff you can do in here. There are 8 playable characters, and they all have different special abilities that just make the game just like that much more fun. This is one of those games, like when you're playing it, it's a very, I kind of compare it to like playing Super Mario Kart back in the day, where like you're playing and it's really competitive, but nobody's getting angry because you're having so much fun. That's what Tetris Battle Gaiden is like. It's just extremely fun, competitive, addictive, and I think at one point this game was like a little bit pricey, like copies were going for like 50 or 60 bucks or something. I think that's actually changed pretty recently, so like loose cards of this game, for example, you can come across them very easily, and I think even box copies, they might still be sort of like in the $40 range, if I'm correct. I might not be. But Tetris Battle Gaiden is well worth picking up. Again, it's my favorite puzzle game on the entire console. One of my favorite puzzle games just in general. So if you are going to get into collecting Super Famicom games, I would say make this one of the first games you pick up, Tetris Battle Gaiden. It is beyond awesome. Next up, I got a few action platformers here, which the Super Famicom is really great with platformers. First up, this game is Psycho Dream by Riot Entertainment. Psycho Dream, it's my understanding, this was like this close to getting a North American release at least, but then at the last minute they pulled out for some reason. This game is just a solid action platformer. I'm not going to say it's like the best on the system or anything. I would say it's not even like all that out of the ordinary, except for the visuals and the sound design. This game has sort of like a creepy, artistic kind of look to it, especially like there's some illustrations in the game, like between stages. Just like a very cool look. So I like the visuals, and I like the sound design as well. The gameplay, again, while not like the best on the system, is like really solid. You have a couple of different characters to choose from, and then as you collect more power-ups for them, obviously they become stronger and stronger until eventually you're just like firing lasers everywhere. So it's a lot of fun. Lots of different kinds of enemies, some pretty, you know, elaborate boss battles, like big monsters, essentially like Mothra kind of character shows up, and a bunch of other things. This is like big grotesque things that you have to kill, and it's all set sort of in kind of like a, a Neo Tokyo kind of setting. So visually very cool, sound design is very cool, and the gameplay is really solid. And just overall, I like the design of this game. I think it does everything right. There's not really any like shortcomings to this game. I wouldn't put it on par with like Castlevania 4, but it's definitely an above average action platformer, I'll put it that way. And Psycho Dream, this is one, again, prices kind of fluctuate, but I would say just keep an eye out for it. Loose cards, complete copies, whichever way you can find it. Psycho Dream, if you like SNES action platformers, you're going to like this one. Next up, we have a game based on a classic 80s manga and anime series. This is GS Mikami Joureishi wa Nice Body. And in this game, you play as the titular character Mikami. She's a witch, so she has magical powers, and she has a baton that she uses to fight all ghosts and demons and monsters and all kinds of other things. Essentially, it's kind of like a detective agency. She's called a ghost sweeper. So kind of like Ghostbusters, if instead there was just like the one Ghostbuster and it was a cute chick with big boobs. That's GS Mikami in a nutshell. So in this game, side-scrolling action platformer, so like I said, you have your baton to attack enemies, but you can get power-ups to shoot lightning and fire and ice and all kinds of stuff. And you can also use your baton to latch on to certain platforms and then flip up and then jump to other platforms. So the platforming is pretty good, the combat is pretty good, and there are a couple of stages that mix things up a little bit. So one has you shrunk down and riding on the back of a cat as it runs across a bunch of different rooftops, so it's like an auto-scrolling stage. You have to deal with enemies as they come in, either taking them out or dodging them in some way. And there's another stage where you're flying on a broom, which, you know, go figure, she's a witch, I guess. But instead of turning that into like a side-scrolling shooter stage, you're still just sort of like whacking away at enemies that come flying on screen. So good, solid action platforming, and then a couple of stages that mix it up a little bit. And the bosses are pretty cool too. They're all different characters taken from the anime, and the graphics, I will say, are like really good. So all of those boss characters, most of them are pretty big character sprites, and they're fairly detailed. They're just really well representative of the anime. The whole game is colorful, detailed, just, you know, a nice looking game in general. It's from Banalex, and I think a Toei Animation thing, so not like it was like this, you know, it's not like a first party thing or like Capcom or something like that, but for a game that I had never heard of until I just came across it one day and picked it up. I hadn't even really heard, you know, much anything about this anime. I didn't really know anything about it. I just saw, oh, okay, anime-based game, looks like an action platformer, and at the time it was pretty cheap. GS Mikami, Jorei Shiwa Nice Body, solid gameplay, really good graphics, pretty good sound design as well, really nice soundtrack on this one. All things considered, you can't go wrong with this one. Another one like Psycho Dream. It's not like, you know, the next Super Castlevania 4, but definitely an above average action platformer. So if you're going to start collecting for the Super Famicom, this is another one that would be a good early game to add to your collection. Next up, we have a game in just this like awesome series of games that was the whole series was exclusive to Japan. This is The Great Battle 4. And what makes this game so awesome is that, I mean, for starters, it's a solid action platformer. It plays really well. The platforming is good. The combat is good. You know, boss battles and everything. In this game, you can swap between Gundam and Ultraman and Kamen Rider. This entire series, you can do that in all the different games. And that's just pretty cool in itself. So if you're a big fan of those Bandai properties, you're going to like this game because it has all of them, but they're like the little chibi versions, like the little Super Robot Tyson versions of them, basically. And you can swap between all of them on the fly. They all have different weapons and special abilities that help you traverse through the stages. Again, there are boss battles, and then there are like the cooler boss battles where all your characters get together in like a big Megazord, and then you have a fight with another huge robot, and you have all kinds of special moves you can do. It's a lot of fun. So the platforming stages are great, the boss battles are awesome, the visuals in this game and pretty much the entire series are really good. I love the character designs. Again, you get your little chibi characters, but then all of the enemies are like little Zakus and other characters. Again, enemies from like Ultraman, Kamen Rider, stuff like that. So if you're a fan of just Bandai in general, if you're a fan of again, Gundam, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, the various generations of those shows, this is something, the entire series is something you're going to want to get into. This is one of the better games in the series. My favorite is 5, but 4 is like a very close runner-up. It's a really great game. Again, gameplay, very solid. Visuals, very good. The soundtrack is awesome, just all around. You cannot go wrong with The Great Battle 4. It's still a very affordable game, especially if you go for a loose cart. You could probably pick this up for like 25 bucks right now, and I think it's worth that. It's really good. I'm not going to say it's one of the better action platformers on the console, but I'd be comfortable putting this and Part 5, like, I don't know, maybe like in the top 20, something like that. They're above average. I said GS Mikami and Psycho Dream are both really good games, and they are. I would say that this is better than both of those. So if you were going to choose from one of these three, I would say go with The Great Battle 4 first. It is a very good action platformer. So the next 3 games are all fighting games based on anime, and with that in mind, you can't go wrong with some good old Dragon Ball Z Hyper Dimension, which I think is a little bit of cheating. I do believe this was released in like one other country. It was either France or Portugal, or maybe Spain. I'm not 100% sure. But for the purposes of this video, we'll say that this is a Super Famicom exclusive. And in the first part of the buying guide, I recommended Super Butoden 2 because it's an awesome game and it's really affordable. The same thing can be said for Hyper Dimension. Pretty much any Dragon Ball Z game is going to be really cheap. But this, I will say in my opinion, is the best Dragon Ball Z game on the Super Famicom. And that's saying a lot because the Super Butoden games are pretty cool. But this is just an all-around better fighting game. So you have sort of like traditional Street Fighter style moves you can do, but then there are like more complex button combinations for like Kamehameha waves and stuff like that. You can knock your enemy up into the air and then follow them and then do some like mid-air fighting, then knock them back down to the ground and continue fighting on the ground. The roster is only like 10 characters, so it's not a very big roster, but it's like, you know, they're good, solid characters. It's like all the ones you would like need to have. So it's Goku and Vegeta, and like Frieza and Cell, and Gohan and Piccolo, and a handful of others. So roster's pretty solid. I really love the visual design of this game. It has sort of like a really like kind of like a dark shading look to it that I don't recall seeing like in any other DBZ games. So definitely better looking than the Super Butoden games, better playing, and it sounds better as well. The soundtrack is pretty good too. So all around, Hyper Dimension, really great game, and also a really affordable game. Like loose carts are like dirt cheap. Like you can find like loose carts of this for probably like 10 bucks maybe, and then box copies aren't that much either. Like at max it'll be like 25, 30 bucks. So if you're a DBZ fan and you're looking to incorporate a DBZ game into your Super Famicom collection, Hyper Dimension is the best of the bunch, in my opinion. Next is Yu Yu Hakusho Final, and again in the first part I featured Yu Yu Hakusho 2, which is a pretty solid Street Fighter style fighting game, and the same can be said for this one, although this one I will say plays quite a bit faster than Yu Yu Hakusho 2. And also it's set like towards the end of the series, so you get characters like, instead of like Toguro and some of the other characters from the Dark Tournament, you get like Sensui and Ryzen, and I believe there's like Yoko Kurama and like Demon Yusuke. There's, you know, pretty cool roster of characters. There's 13 characters in total, so not a bad roster at all. Fun fighting game, great controls, plays more or less like Street Fighter. But you have like energy bars that you can charge up, and then you can do like, you know, essentially like super combos, and just like take a bigger chunk of your meter away. But you can also do just like regular special attacks that only take away like a little tiny chunk. So fun game. There's like a single player mode versus, I think there's like tournament and training. So there are a handful of gameplay modes as well. Graphics are good, sound design is good, gameplay is good, and it's based on Yu Yu Hakusho, people, my personal favorite anime series of all time. So you can't go wrong with that. So if you're a Yu Yu Hakusho fan, this and Yu Yu Hakusho 2, you can't go wrong with either of them. And again, a very affordable game. If you find a loose card, you're probably going to pay like 15 bucks for it, if that. And a complete copy, yeah, maybe you're looking at like 30 bucks or so. So if you're a fan of the series, this one is one you're really going to want to have in your Super Famicom collection. And last, but certainly not least, one of my favorite games I'm talking about today, this is Gundam Wing Endless Duel. And I like this game. This is another game that I included in my top 10 Super Famicom list. I mean, it's just awesome. First of all, Gundam Wing, so you can't go wrong with that. But second, it's made by Natsume, which I really love Natsume's games from the 8 and 16-bit era. And if you've played Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the Fighting Edition, very similar to that. You got your giant robots, you got basically Street Fighter style moves. They don't move all clunky and stuff though, they move more or less like people. It's just they're not people, they're Gundams. They have all kinds of different attacks. The roster is pretty big. I think the roster is something on maybe like 10, 12 characters, something like that. You have all of the different Gundams from that series, and then you have a handful of others like Tall Geese and what was the Epion. So there's a whole bunch of different mechs. So the gameplay is really fun. You have your, basically like your energy number, and you can use that to do special attacks, but then you also have like super attacks you can do, again, like in Yu Yu Hakusho, like super combos, essentially, and they're all different for each character. So like Heavy Arms, for example, just like unloads with all of his, just everything he's got, all of his artillery. Gundam Wing will pull out like double like Buster rifles and just like keep blasting at you. So that's very cool. The gameplay is really fun. The graphics are just like beautiful. Like this is one of the best looking Super Famicom games, like period. The character sprites are really large and detailed. The stages are also really detailed and colorful. Just like a beautiful game, and the soundtrack is like really amazing too. I'm surprised at some of the music they're actually able to get out of the Super Famicom sound chip for this game. So just like all around, this is I say this is my third favorite fighting game, maybe fourth favorite for the SNES and Super Famicom, behind like, you know, Super Street Fighter 2, Killer Instinct, and probably like Mortal Kombat 2. And then you have this as well. This is a top-notch fighting game. It really is one of the best fighters, regardless of region. Gundam Wing Endless Duel, cannot recommend this game enough. If you're going to start a Super Famicom collection, this is one you're definitely going to want to add to it. And I'm going to close the show with a couple of shoot-'em-ups. And the Super Famicom, not exactly like well known for shooters, but there are definitely some good ones on it. And I did a top 10 list of SNES and Super Famicom shooters, and both of these games are on there. In fact, one of them was on my top 10 Super Famicom games list, period. But this game, Cotton 100%, which is, I guess, essentially like the Super Famicom version of Fantastic Night Dreams, although there are definitely some differences in terms of some of the stage layouts and enemies and things like that. But a great game. If you don't know what Cotton is, it's you're a witch riding on a broom, blasting all kinds of little monsters and creatures with your magical energy. You collect crystals that power up your shot, but then you also collect crystals that give you magic attacks, and so you can shoot like fire and ice and all kinds of other stuff. They're basically like your super bombs, are these really powerful magic attacks. So like it's really fun. The boss battles are great. The boss battles are usually like these like really big monsters and stuff like that. Really great looking game, like super colorful, like large character sprites, especially those boss characters. They're like really big, kind of like elaborately designed characters. They look great. And this overall like really great like fantasy setting, so like colorful and bright, all these like cool like monsters and creatures, all this like fantasy stuff everywhere. So I like it a lot. I like the character of Cotton. She's kind of like an anti-hero. Like, she doesn't really care about saving the world or anything. It's just there are these like magical candy things that she really wants. So that's really the only reason why she's like helping out these fairies. Also, the fairies themselves, they can kind of act like options, like from Gradius. So you can save fairies, and then they'll follow you around and attack with you, and you can actually like send them after enemies, and they'll sort of like all go collectively and like kill the enemy. And if you die, like one of your fairies will like sacrifice themselves, so they just blow themselves up and like clear everything from the screen. So that's pretty cool. But Cotton 100%, really, like, aside from like the only Cotton game I've ever played that I didn't like really was Rainbow Cotton on the Dreamcast, which would be a great game if like you could actually see what was going on. Because like visually and sound design wise, the game is awesome, but the gameplay is lame. But I'm going off on a tangent. This is not a Dreamcast buying guide. This game though, really good, like this, or the one on the PC Engine, or the Saturn, or really just any Cotton game you can play. If it's one of the side-scrolling shooters, that is, definitely go out of your way to play it. Cotton 100% on the Super Famicom. This is maybe the most expensive game I'm showing off today. I think this can be like an $80 game, something to that effect. So I guess if you're putting together a Super Famicom collection and you've got some money to spare and you like shoot-'em-ups and you like particularly kind of like cute-'em-ups, Cotton 100%, like this, maybe like Twinbee, like these are the best cute-'em-ups on the console. Not that there are like a whole lot of cute-'em-ups on it, but there you go. But regardless, this is a really solid shooter, really fun game, just gameplay, graphics, sound, can't go wrong. Cotton 100%, definitely add it to your Super Famicom collection. And last, but certainly not least, again, a game I put in my top 10 Super Famicom games list, just an excellent shooter. This is Macross Scrambled Valkyrie. And if anyone doesn't know what Macross is, I mean, stop watching this video, go look up some Macross, go watch some of the OVAs, or some of the series. I know there have been like a whole bunch. There's some more recent Macross that I'm not too familiar with, but go back and watch the OVAs. Go watch Do You Remember Love or something like that, or just go watch, like, I don't know, like Robotech. They converted some Macross into Robotech back in the day. This game though takes place, I believe, somewhere right around the time of Do You Remember Love, but with some different characters. But essentially you have 3 characters to choose from, and they each occupy a different ship, and each ship has 3 different forms. So it's like your jet and your mech, and then sort of like that weird like in-between form, and each different form has a different shot pattern. And so all 3 characters have 3 different forms, and they all have different shot patterns. So it's like you have 9 different ways to attack in total. And so like each character is like better in one capacity or the other. One character might have like homing shots, but the other one has like these really powerful shots. So it's really kind of up to you and like your gameplay, how you like your to play a shooter. Like if you prefer like just straight up like power and just getting up close and just blasting everything away immediately, or if you kind of like more, you know, prefer to like hang in the back and kind of like dip and dodge and let your homing shot do all the work. So yeah, really great shooter overall, and just another game where like the visuals are like fantastic. Like this is, I believe this was released in '93, and I remember definitely the first time I played this, I was really impressed by the visuals. They're really, really good. The soundtrack is excellent. There's really nothing bad I can say about this game. Again, it's in my top 10 Super Famicom list, so maybe I'll like include a link down in the description to that video, because that might work as like a good supplement to a buying guide. The games that I think are the 10 best Super Famicom exclusives, but this one is on there. I think I put it at like number 5 or number 4. I put it way up there because I'm a big shooter fan. I'm a Macross fan, and this game is just like, it's an amazing shooter. It's one of, I would say, like top 5 shooters on the Super Famicom. Maybe it's up there with like, you know, R-Type and Gradius. It's really, really good. Great visuals, great sound design. You really just can't go wrong. If you're gonna put together a Super Famicom collection, this is another one where you really shouldn't be without. Macross Scrambled Valkyrie. Check it out. So there you go. Those are 10 more games that if you are gonna pick up a Super Famicom and you want to start putting together a collection of games for it, these are definitely games you're gonna want to add to the fold. Again, go and check out part 1 to see some games that are definitely like on the cheaper side, and like these games are also like English friendly, and they're really good games. Again, this time around I wasn't thinking so much about price, just as much as, you know, 10 more games that you know pretty much anybody would be really happy to have in their Super Famicom collection. And again, Ys 5, go look up the translation. Maybe even go look for one of the reproduction carts. They're pretty damn cool, and they've done all the work for you. You get a cart and it's in English and it's all good. So definitely check out any or all of these games. You will not be sorry that you did. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite Super Famicom games are, if you've played or collected for the Super Famicom, that is. And if not, let me know if any of these games tickled your fancy. Maybe I could elaborate a little more on some of them, like Yu Yu Hakusho Final and Great Battle 4, for example. I've never done like reviews on these games or anything. So this is all stuff, candidates to be featured in Import Game of the Day. Actually, Great Battle 4 already was Import Game of the Day, so I'll put that link down in the description too. You can go check out some of that. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. Why am I saying that? I don't know, it's cliched, but yeah, 10 Super Famicom games. Go check them out, look them up, buy them, enjoy them, and you're welcome if you didn't already know about these games. So thanks for watching, everybody, and take care. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Very impressive. Stopped my blitzball. That's done. You are worthy of feeling the greatest technique.